Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to everybody who has found me through my 2023 favorites video and who has subscribed. It obviously brought me a lot of joy to put together that list. And now we're gonna go into the opposite direction. We're gonna talk about the worst books that I read in 2023, including all the books that I DNF'd, so did not finish. As usual, take this video with a grain of salt. It's also kind of just a video to, to have a little bit of fun. Everything is highly subjective, and if you loved any of the books that I'm showing here, then don't afraid to let me know in the comments and why you loved it, or maybe there's a book that I didn't finish and you think I'm missing out. The first book that I gave up on at 41%, probably a bit controversial because a lot of people love this book, is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is a contemporary romance novel where we have our characters January, who is a romance writer who has been recently disillusioned by love, and then we have Gus, who writes litfic and has now a writer's block. One summer they happen to end up at neighboring beach houses, and they take on this challenge where they swap novels, so one has to write the other's project, and along the way they're supposed to fall in love, obviously. I think, because I never finished the book. Both June and Gus were interesting characters as individuals. I was interested to read about their backstory and what has been happening in their families, why they are now stuck in their writing projects. But I found myself really disinterested in how they go from enemies to lovers. I was also just not feeling the chemistry at all. I was not feeling how January was attracted to Gus. None of the descriptions about his veiny forearms resonated with me. I decided at some point that it was really not worth it for me to keep going, and I'm glad that I stuck with that decision, because never since I've DNF'd that book have I thought about this book until now when I was putting together the list. Additionally, I loved Book Lovers by Emily Henry, so I know that this author is capable of writing compelling romance that caters to my tastes, which is why I don't feel bad about DNFing this. I'm just gonna give her another chance with another one of her books. The second book I didn't finish. I stopped at page 155 out of, I think, almost 500 pages, because it's a chunky fantasy book, is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Lynn. This was super popular when it came out. It's a debut novel. I heard a lot of amazing things about it, which is why I wanted to try. In this book, the titular Daughter of the Moon Goddess, Sinyin, her existence is a secret, and she is forced to flee her home and hide in the Celestial Kingdom, where she has to disguise her identity alongside the court. To be very frank with you, I just felt bored. I have no ill will towards this book or this author or the story, but I was just bored while I was reading it. I was only on page 150 and I thought, wow, there's still so many pages left and I'm just not interested in what's gonna happen in this story, so I DNF'd it. For me personally, the world building felt way too small. Could have to do with the fact that this is definitely for folklore inspired, but the world didn't feel expansive enough to me. There's a magic system in place that is not very well explored, at least to the point where I was reading. And there's a love story in here that really felt more like a friendship, so the love felt very insta-lovey, very forced, and the characters ended up being or staying very two-dimensional until the point where I was reading. There's a chance you might have really loved this book. Please let me know why, but I was just very bored from this experience, and I'm okay with that because there's so many other fantasy books out there that are still on my list, so I'm gonna give my time to those. The last book that I didn't finish, I stopped reading at 15%, is a nonfiction. It's The Book of Difficult Fruit by Kate Lebo. This is a book that consists of 26 essays about 26 different types of fruit, some more well-known than others, and you go in alphabetical order, so that's why it's 26. This is one of those books that is hard to categorize because there's also some memoir pieces in here, so there's quite a bit of bits about her relationship to her mother, for example. Also quite a bit about the author, what they eat, obviously, because this is a book about fruit, and their health. Where this book started to lose me is when the author was writing about how their general physician is a naturopath and not an MD. And that's where I thought, okay, maybe I'm not the target audience, which is fine. The author also includes recipes at the end of each chapter to use the fruit for, which I thought was interesting, but then, for example, she said that she doesn't like durian because if you've heard about durian, the smell is apparently absolutely horrendous, and yet she includes a recipe for durian lip balm. So I thought, okay, if you really dislike the taste and smell, why would you include a lip balm recipe in here? That was a bit odd. And also there were some recipes included where there was also a warning for poison control, because this is not really regulated, might not be very healthy for a human to consume. So yeah, just a bit odd for my taste. I'm not the target audience, it's fine. Somebody else might enjoy this, but this was just not for me. I think I stopped at the letter C. Moving on to the two books where I just thought, these are not good books. I didn't give them a high rating, and I honestly wouldn't necessarily recommend them to anyone. The first book that I really cannot recommend is Passenger 23 by Sebastian Fitzek. Sebastian Fitzek is like the John Grisham of Germany. He pumps out so many books, and he crowds the bestseller list usually, which is why I wanted to try one of his books, because I thought there's probably a reason why everybody loves him. His books, and this one in particular, they are available in English. The English version of this is actually blurbed by Harlan Coben. This is a psychological, fast-paced thriller where our main character is Martin Schwartz. He is a police psychologist who lost his son and wife 5 years ago while they were both on a cruise ship. In present time, he is called on board another cruise ship, the Sultan of the Seas, because weirdly, his dead son's teddy bear was found on the ship. First of all, I genuinely did not enjoy the writing to a point where, you know, I noticed it, it bothered me. It reads extremely choppy, which I think is done obviously on purpose, because this is supposed to be super fast paced. The characters speak in a very vulgar manner often, which is supposed to make them sound edgy and eccentric. I have no problems with characters using vulgar language, but in this case, it ended up sounding very ridiculous and super campy, not in a good way. There's a huge trigger warning for this, for child abuse. Child abuse is what this book is about, which I didn't know going in. So that is a very uncomfortable and horrible topic in itself, which made it even worse for me that I really felt like the author was using it as a shock factor, as a device, as a plot device, but not further going into that theme and questioning it, questioning the motives, or showing compassion for the victims. And I felt that my inkling was further confirmed with the author's note in the end, because the author uses that place to inform the readers about crimes and stats aboard cruises, and not about child abuse. Again, I thought it was the main topic of this book, and if he really cared about that topic, then I think he would have used the author's note to address it specifically. I've seen quite a few reviewers say that this is his best thriller or one of his best. So if people that are part of his loyal fan base say this is one of his best, then I truly don't think I need to pick up anything else by this author. I'm glad that I gave him a try. Now I can say I tried a Fitzek, but not my thing. I'm gonna move on to other thriller authors because I love that genre. Another book that I really disliked, and this makes me sad, is The Sugar Thief by Nancy Mauro. I'm sad because this is one of the two books that my boyfriend got me at the beginning of the year. We have a tradition now that every year he gets me 2 books. He goes to the bookstore on his own, picks up random ones. Most of the time I've never heard about them. Usually one is a hit, one is a miss. This one unfortunately is a miss. So this is described as, and I'm reading this from Goodreads, as a deliciously comedic family melodrama. So our main character is Sabine Rose, and she's about to take her baking channel on YouTube to the next level because she's hoping that she's gonna land a Netflix series deal. And part of closing that deal is to go back to her hometown with her assistant Wanda and her cameraman, and they're supposed to film her reuniting with her family that runs a famous bakery and that brought out an iconic pastry. The thing is, when I decide to put books on my TBR, I usually get my recommendations from YouTube, from blogs, from Instagram posts. I don't really pay attention to the blurbs and the descriptions, but for books that I've never heard anything of, I actually read the cover and the back. So I thought this is gonna be as it says, a comedy with a bit of drama, and you know, it's, look at the cover, there's a, no, it's not a macaron, it's a Persian, it's a pastry, but it's pink, and it's about a baking YouTube channel. I thought that this is going to be light and fluffy, but it's not. It's weirdly dark. confusingly dark. The characters are all extremely eccentric, but without any redeeming qualities to them. It is not the type of bad people that you find delicious and it's fun to read about them. They just come off as extremely unbalanced with overly dramatic backstories. Then there's a second storyline in here that happens in the past and is trying to add a mystery element to this story. I honestly thought that this book couldn't decide what it is, tonally and also thematically. The mystery is honestly not well executed. I couldn't bring myself to care. On top of that, Wanda, the assistant, is Filipino-Canadian, and her backstory and her family generally gave me the ick. As a fellow Filipina woman, I don't know how else to describe it. The author is heavily borrowing from the trope of an immigrant family having a lot of money issues and issues with the bank. On top of that, also mental health issues, by the way, in a way that this bookman could have really benefited from a sensitivity reader. I'm sorry that I sound so spiteful, but this book just had a truly weird storyline with weird characters with a narrative tone that really threw me off. So this was 1.5 stars for me. I mean, I read a lot of books. There has to be a miss in there somewhere. I'm just sad that it happens to be one of the books that my boyfriend picked up for me. Now I'm moving on to my most disappointing books of 2023. So I don't think that these are bad books. My expectation just didn't match my final experience. The first one is A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand, and this is the first time that the estate of Shirley Jackson allowed an author to return to Hill House, the titular house of The Haunting of Hill House. This is a modern horror classic that actually made my top 15 list of 2023. I was so excited about this book that is set within the same world. So this is about playwright Holly, who is workshopping her new musical at Hill House with a little theater troupe. My issues with this really started with the very modern setting in the post-pandemic world. I guess for me it would have been cooler if it was a bit more timeless. The paranormal and ghostly occurrences were wonderfully eerie. I really liked those, but I just really didn't warm up to any of the characters. I couldn't care about their storylines. I found that the cast of characters chosen to represent the townies also to be very odd. And on top of that, I was really not interested in the musical that was being put together in the story, and that took up a lot of the plot line. So all in all, I was just disappointed. It was not my thing, but I heard that people who love other works of Elizabeth Hand really enjoyed this book, so you might be one of them. Please try this book, just not for me. The other disappointing book is Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. Now, Agatha Christie is one of my favorite authors. If you watch my channel, you know that. This is why it's in the disappointing category, because this just really doesn't compare to any of the other novels I read from the author. This is the story of a young girl at a Halloween party who brags that she's witnessed a murder before, and shortly after she's found drowned in an apple bobbing tub. My main issue is that this is a Poirot story. So we have our Belgian detective Hercule Poirot. We just don't get him being himself in this book. We don't get his signature, him acting all smart, borderline super arrogant and smug about his little gray cells, as he likes to call his brain and brain power. He's not confidently asking people questions and investigating murder scenes. Usually as a reader, you wait for him to gather all the information and then do the big reveal in the end, but he's mostly very passive in this book, and I think that has to do with, at this point in the story, if I understood correctly, he technically wanted to retire, so he's reluctantly coming back, and you really feel that. So that really hindered my enjoyment. The other thing is there's a very odd lot of finger pointing towards people with criminal backgrounds, people with mental health issues and drug users, to a point where I really noticed it because it occurred so many times. I don't know if that was just supposed to be a form of a red herring, but I just found it very distracting. Instead of reading Halloween Party, I would just implore you to watch A Haunting in Venice, the movie that came out last year. So that movie is based off this book, but it doesn't really have anything to do with this story except that the characters share the names. But I found that that book set in Venice, that movie, was actually really enjoyable compared to this book. So just watch the movie instead of reading this, even though it's two different stories. The last book I need to mention breaks my heart the most. It's Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson. I wanted to DNF this so many times, so badly, because this is the third book that I'm reading, and I read 2 extra novellas and I want to know what happens in the end. I forced myself to finish this book, but it was not a great experience. This is the third book, and I think it's going to be a 4-book series. Hopefully, because if the next book is going to be just like this one, I don't want to keep going. So the first book was a 5 stars for me. It was so amazing. I loved it. I recommended it to so many people. The second book was still a very, very solid 4 stars. But this, it felt like it was written by an entirely different author. So Skyward is about the remnants of the human race that are trapped on a distant planet, and they keep being attacked by mysterious aliens. So our main character, Spencer, is a young teenage girl who is an outcast of their society, and her biggest dream is to attend flight school to become one of the fighter pilots. The stakes were always so high. There was like the learning academy setting, the friendships. I was so incredibly invested in what was happening in the world. The first 2 books were page turners, but in this book, it feels like we have absolutely none of that. Maybe it's because this is book 3 and the world really opened up now. This is now a sci-fi book that is very, very abstract. But the thing is, I could still follow everything. I just didn't feel attached to any of the characters or attached to any of the storylines. I was not invested at all. So this one disappoints me the most because I loved the first 2, especially the first one, so much. So that is all the books. I hope you had a bit of fun with me listening to this. I hope you didn't take it too seriously. And if you want to let me know that you're still watching, why don't you leave me some kind of space or alien emoji? You can be creative as you want. Let me know, are there any books that you did not finish last year or books that you were disappointed by? As always, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe if you love watching bookish videos, and give this video a thumbs up if you like a little bit of ranting here and there. Thank you, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.